We're just looking in our prior segment at that Bank of America outlook on Nigeria. So there have been a lot of, a number of reforms that have taken place, particularly in the area of the currency and also with fuel subsidies. So with more reforms hopefully coming down the line, what does Nigeria's investment outlook look like, or rather investment landscape? So we've got a player in that sector, Mr. Otu Hughes, who is the Chief Investment Officer of the Honeywell Group. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic. Looking forward to this conversation. I was reading up quotes that you were quoted in, I think it was Business Day not too long ago, where you were talking about where your focus is. So you said you've played across various sectors of the Nigerian economy, often taking the first money risk by going into places where others are not prepared to explore and create an environment to bring in external capital. You sound like a hedge fund. So would those sectors include like mining, electric vehicles, or crypto? What explain that?
Well, let me correct this hedge fund impression first. Yeah. We're not a hedge fund.
Okay.
Our focus really is long-term strategic. So it's key for us. We look at sectors, we look at the economy, we look at how things are developing, and then we try to find places where that first money can be impactful. Because we appreciate the fact that if you get the first money right in the right place, your returns are multiples.
Yeah, and you get first mover advantage.
You get first mover advantage. You know, you're in a position to help shape an ecosystem, and the benefits are just plenty, right? Youth employment, returns, capital formation. So all of those things are there. So that's really what we try to look at, right?
Great stuff.
We don't do too much of the hedge fund portfolio, right. move out kind of capital.
Great stuff.
We are there to stay.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of areas, you know, it's funny you talked about what
mining, crypto, electric vehicles, and all the likes.
You look at the last 5-6 years. We've talked about fintech, we've talked about crypto, we've talked about battery mining, EV. Yeah. Yesterday, it became AI.
Right.
There are all of these innovations coming up. And for us, it's exciting. It's exciting times, both locally and globally, because as these innovations come up, it allows us to look at the broad spectrum of opportunities out there, get our thinking caps on, try to figure out how best we can be able to move and make the investment. So we look at all of these areas.
Exactly.
And as well as looking at some of the old areas that people tend to forget still exist and provide a sustenance for us. So we look at all of them.
Great stuff. I have another quote. So this is going to take us through what we're looking at here, where you're saying that you're trying to attract external capital, but it becomes an issue when macroeconomic challenges are not fixed. So with that in mind, taking a look at recent reforms to try to fix these macroeconomic issues and the opportunities that they present, I would like us to begin with, I guess, the removal of fuel subsidies. Does that create an opportunity for you maybe in the downstream sector? How do you see that playing out?
No, it does broadly for everybody in the market, right? But to take a step back, you know, when investors look at a particular place to invest, right, to commit capital, and these investors include both local and foreign, by the way. I mean, we shouldn't just think of it just as the foreign money coming in, because locals also make the same decisions. Where do I deploy my capital?
Yeah.
Right. We start looking at, you know, what does the politics look like? Is it stable? Is it clear? Do we understand? What are the regulations around different sectors? Is it clear? Is it transparent? Do we understand? Once we check off those boxes, then we start looking at what are the risks we are taking and what are the returns. Right? Okay. Now, definitely the moving of the fuel subsidy, considering its impacts on the country's economy and finances, is pretty good. I mean, there was this day piece talking about potentially 8 trillion over the last 18 months potentially, right? Which is a pretty big sum of money, considering the size of the economy and what our budget looks like. So we look at those things and we're hoping that that capital gets redirected into areas which have higher return on investment, and by that, for a country that's going to be on the infrastructure side, and also returns on human capital, whether it's education or healthcare, because all of those things help to improve the overall country. And with all of that, we definitely, it improves the situation, we benefit from it. But these things also have harsh effects on people.
Right.
But especially look at some of the more vulnerable. And so we hope that as a government make some of these shifts, it also puts in place the right
interventions or palliatives,
thank
as
you
they're
very
called.
much.
Right.
The right palliatives to cushion.
Yeah.
Because else it can be harsh.
It can be tough.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what about another point is the liberalization of the exchange rates. For years now, a lot of investors have been calling for that. Does that also open things up for you as well?
No, it does.
It does.
It does open things up because now the discussions shift from what is the value to how do we actually make the value. Because previously your discussions with people who were around, is the rate right, and am I coming in at whatever the number is.
Yeah.
But now that discussion has gone away.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a bit of time for the currency to stabilize.
Yeah.
We've seen rates go all over the place, right? And we just need enough of the volumes coming in, enough of the stabilization going on, and we're definitely looking forward to that stabilization period because definitely it attracts capital.
Yeah. So speaking of currencies, are you looking outside? Because every time anyone comes to Nigeria talks about looking at investing in Nigeria, it's so large, so big, biggest country in Africa, biggest economy and so on. But what about outside? As far as we are looking at with opportunities, does this go outside Nigeria's boundaries?
Not too much. We're local.
We're local, right?
Listen, indigenous. We've been playing in this market for 50 years.
Yeah.
We know Nigeria very well. We love Nigeria, so we start looking at Nigeria first.
Yeah.
Right. But we keep our eyes open.
Yeah.
Right. Especially with all of this Africa free trade and.
You preempted my next question. Keep going. That's it. You preempted. That was where I was going next.
And some of the opportunities which should come out of it. Right. I mean, you look at. So let me segue. Let me talk about both that and then talk about fintech.
Yeah.
Combined. You look at Africa free trade and what it's trying to do, liberalizing movement of people and goods across borders.
Yeah.
Right. And for that impact could have. Yes, Nigeria is a big market. It's when you take ECOWAS, listen, it dwarfs ECOWAS.
Yeah.
But when you expand it across a continent, there's more opportunity for Nigerian businesses to do more outside.
All right.
Now, at the same time, too, it offers opportunities for others also coming. Right. Creates an interesting dynamic, but then you have that bigger market. Now, hopefully, we can be able to put in place the right payment structures, because today, even as we're crossing borders, we are still trading in dollars.
Right.
And it would be helpful that as we are crossing borders, we are finding mechanisms to allow us to trade, to exchange currencies locally.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to take time. It's going to take traders acting amongst themselves, but we need to get that stuff going. And some of our fintechs, frankly, are finding ways to allow us to move naira to
CDs and other
kind of stuff, right? And so those are some of the innovations that, for us, it's exciting, and we're looking forward to more of those coming up.
In fact, because Arise News we're in Ghana covering the Afri-Exim Bank 30th anniversary and their PAP system. They're looking at trying to make sure that they can get that conversion going. Okay, so back to Nigeria. Another area of reform, in a way, there's another thing that might have some pressure on the average Nigerian is cost-effective tariffs in the electricity sector, which we're looking at possibly because of the movement in exchange rates, that might move up the medium-term tariff order also. Does that open things up? If you have cost-effective tariffs, are you looking at the power sector and what opportunities might come out there?
We've looked at power sector. I mean, we've looked at it for longer than most people.
Okay.
Right. So we accurately understand what effects the tariffs not being cost effective can have on that development of the space. So it's, on one hand, it's good news that the government is moving in that direction. But we also have to keep in mind that lots of manufacturers and businesses have been forced to operate businesses using diesel.
Right.
So they have been already operating at a higher cost than what I estimate the cost-effective tariff is going to be. Because if you combine running diesel versus being able to run something with natural gas, for example, you realize that your blended cost is much lower.
Right.
So yes, it's going to be positive because it's one of the things that we need in this country. I mean, manufacturers are struggling just to get things going without that, but it's going to be helpful. But it's also going to be another hit.
Right, on the average
On
Nigerian.
the average Nigerian. So government has quite a bit of work to do in creating a number of cushions and palliatives as they put in place all of these changes.
Yeah.
But what we expect is that as they go in and this season, right, the effect is going to be felt by all.
Yeah.
The benefits is going to be plentiful across.
I have to ask you about Nigeria's mining sector, which frankly has underperformed. If you look at what mining means to Ghana, what it means to South Africa, Australia, all these, China, mining is huge. And Nigeria is blessed with so many minerals. Is that a space you also looked at? What's your take on the mining? Because I know smuggling and all these other issues have hit it. So does that deter a Honeywell Group, for example, from going in there? How do you look at mining?
Well, mining for us, we look at it the same way as we look at all of these different things which have come up in the last few years, right? It's another name being thrown into the box, right? Of people looking at, right? It's gotten some interest, some press. People look at what has happened in neighboring countries and they believe mining too could be big here.
Yeah.
And so for us, similar as we're looking at all of these fintechs, AIs, it's in the bucket.
Okay.
We look at it dispassionately, and we'll keep on looking at that in other areas and see where.
Got you. We've touched on sector after sector. It just shows how massive the Nigerian economy is. Tourism, right? There was an article in, I think it was Business Day yesterday, saying that because of the cost of tickets, Nigerians are not looking at going to Europe or America again. They're going to have to look at traveling within their own country or going to other African nations. And of course, we know about the insecurity challenges. So what's your view on tourism? Are you going to play in that space as well?
I wouldn't even talk about the tickets one, but let's even go back to COVID.
Okay.
Because we are investors in Radisson Blu, Anchorage.
Oh, okay.
For example, right? So we had a front seat, quote unquote, to what happened during the COVID era, how people's movements changed.
Yeah.
And we saw people doing more staycations.
Okay.
Right? So yes, the foreign business dried up, but we saw more of your local visits, your local tourists coming over to Lagos to spend time. So we believe that there is room there for investment, for development, and we've seen it. Right? So not just based on the currency alone, but we've actually had seen it during the COVID era. Now, hopefully, but then part of your challenges, if you take away your major cities, part of your challenges become how do you get to some of these other places? Right. And so it comes down to building out this infrastructure, which allows people to get to some of these other tourist areas. And then, the security will get dealt with. The infrastructure, and then people also providing them the right hotels and the right facilities, right? So it's a space. It's an interesting space.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't looked beyond Lagos and Abuja yet,
Okay.
but as things get built out, definitely something that we would keep.
There's so much potential, as you know, the cross river states, the northern part. There's just so many. We could have this conversation for hours. There's so many. There's so many sectors. Real estates. You mentioned Lagos and Abuja. Outside of Lagos and Abuja, do you see any real estate potential? What's your outlook for the real estate sector for Nigeria?
You read the statistics about 28 million housing deficits across the country. Right. And talking about potentially in Nigeria, it's literally, you pick a map, you pick a dart, you throw it, and you can go do whatever you want to do in that part of the country, right? So that is the opportunity. But that also then means that for a relatively small shop like us, we also have to focus. Right. Because we can't just do everything and be everywhere. Right? Although we will have to be. Right. So for now, on real estate, we are primarily doing Lagos. Right. A little bit of Abuja, and then that's but it's more a function of just capacity.
Gotcha.
You go across the country and God Almighty.
It's huge.
It's all over, and that's the beauty of this country.
Yes.
Opportunities are all over the place, and all we looking for is some clarity and stability, and then businesses will take off.
Wow. I mean, just imagine, it's been a great conversation. It just makes one dream of a Nigeria with 24/7 power, no insecurity, tourism everywhere, housing. It's great stuff. Mr. Otu Hughes, as Chief Investment Officer, Honeywell Group, thank you so much for a very informative conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you
right.
very, very much.